My name's Tom Kueneman. I want to give a shout out to John Mooney and Bud. Is Louis here? Nancy, where's Nancy? Hi, Nancy. Also want to say hi to Terry. Thank you, Terry. I'm waiting for, there we go, we're up. And also to John and Therese. And I also want to say hi to the five. The five know who you are. You guys are still awesome. Joe Blanco, thank you for your encouragement this morning. Good afternoon to the rest of you. Next photo is a picture of my family. And I have much to be grateful for, as you can see. 6 kids and 1 daughter-in-law. And the oldest is 29, the youngest is 6, as you may have heard. And I call the youngest the surprise guy. And he lets me right now, too. I have found a fulfilling way to living life, and his name is Jesus. Amen? Share some scriptures with you. Proverbs 11:9, with their mouths the godless destroy their neighbors, but through knowledge the righteous escape. Proverbs 11:12, the man who lacks judgment derides his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his tongue. Proverbs 11:25, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will also be refreshed. And 2 Chronicles 7 through 14, which was also the closing verse on the movie War Room, if you haven't seen it. It's a must-see. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Got a couple slides of past employment for me. Right out of high school, I went to Ranch, Nebraska. After some time there, came back to California and worked on an alfalfa sprout farm, taking my multiple gap years before I started college. Later worked at a Christian production company, top right corner, for a few years. Produced videos and shows for teens, and then joined the Wattsville Fire Department for 15 years. Got into ag research with a company called Plant Sciences, spent 16 years there. There's some overlap there, folks. And then there's a bumblebee there. I had the opportunity to open up the first commercial bumblebee breeding facility in the United States, which was very cool venture. Moved to the desert, and the next slide will show working in the produce business on the top left, opened a series of restaurants in the desert, got into the golf business, and then back in agriculture the last 6.5 years. The world's a crazy place, and so have been the places I've been. It seems to me that we are experiencing with greater frequency and intensity more chaos, more pain, and unthinkable loss and hardship. Before we get too down, let's take a quiz. I'm going to get some water, if I may. I had a bottle. That bottle right there on the end is mine. So join me in this quiz. So back in the 60s, there was a saying, if it feels good, I have my truth. Very good. I'm okay. You guys are pretty intelligent. In fact, we've all been indoctrinated. We've all been indoctrinated. The fact is, that is really existentialism. And how did we get there? In the 60s, existentialism meant to remove moral restraint. Popular slogans like make love, not war. In the 70s, many things changed. The music changed, the literature changed, academia changed. This was embedded into the life of our culture. In the 80s, existentialism went to the financial sector, and we learned that greed was good. By the 90s, we were the me generation. And in the 2000s, pluralism. Pluralism is every opinion or viewpoint is exactly the same as the other in power and equality. There are no absolutes. No one can tell anyone that this is right and this is wrong. Many of the issues of immorality, the issues of the environment, the issues of political correctness in politics are really symptoms of existentialism. So, Dwayne, we had another slide. You can just skip it later, but I had a slide out of place. But I'm going to go right into the slide that's not on the screen. Is Jesus still relevant with all of this going on? He is. It should also come as no surprise to us that in this modern culture we live, relevance of Jesus is being undermined and questioned. The reason is simple. The philosophy of Christ is very different from the prevailing philosophies of our modern culture. The prevailing philosophies of our modern culture are individualism, what's in it for me? Hedonism, if it feels good, do it. Minimalism, what is the least I can do to get by? In fact, they are completely opposed to each other, and yet the teachings of Christ and these modern philosophies of our day both claim to be the key to fulfillment of a yearning that is common in all of us. As believers, we have the opportunity to be salt and light. In Matthew 5, Jesus saw the crowds. He went up to the mountaintop and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. After teaching the attributes of the Beatitudes, he went on to say, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world," he said. "Town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Glory. When we look at being salt and light in this culture, in our workplace in particular, we need to remind ourselves that we are living in the fastest changing period of all human history. Information is doubling every 3 to 4 years. We have real struggles in every facet of society. At stake are the values and eternal truths that have been ordained by God and handed down over the centuries. We are going to see the issues of religious liberty come to a boiling point. We need to be the salt and light in this culture, our workplace, and for the sake of the next generation. Salt was very valuable in Jesus' time. It was used in a number of ways. Salt preserved. It preserved things from corrupting. Salt flavored things. Changed the taste of things. We changed the taste. We as salt changed the taste and direction and the sense of our culture. Light does a few things. Light exposes. It exposes what needs to be outed. Light reveals. Light reveals authenticity and truth. Light gives direction. You can see a candle from several miles away. Light gives direction to those who are lost. Being salt and light in our work and workplace we can preach the gospel by our own words and by the actions of our lives. As followers of Jesus, this is what we're made to do. Curtis Martin wrote a book, Made for More. Isn't it time you discover the life God created you to live? Pastor Rick Warren wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. And there's 42 days of devotion broken up into 6 different categories. What on earth am I here for? Purpose 1, we were planned for God's pleasure. You were formed for God's family. You were created to become like Christ. You were shaped for serving God. And our take-home message today is you were made for a mission. What is our mission? Living with a purpose. Purpose of work. Work is good. God, the creator of the universe, acknowledged his work in the book of Genesis.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work.
And he said it was good. Can we say that together? It was good. God, through his own example, has created us to work. In dignity, I have a definition from a couple sources: a formal, stately, or grave-bearing. He entered with dignity. The state or equality of being worthy of honor. The dignity of manual labor. And a comment I found online from a lady named Cindy was excellent. She wrote, "I was looking to find the meaning of human dignity and saw that innate right to be valued." Creating value brings human dignity, fulfilling the innate right to be valued. As we look more closely at our work, I want to quote C.S. Lewis here. "Aim for heaven and you will get earth thrown in." In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis writes, "If you read history, you will find out that the Christians who did the most for the present world were just those who thought the most of the next." The apostles themselves set out on foot for conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, the English evangelical who abolished slavery. All left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. Looking at these cathedrals here, you can't name the names of the builders of the great cathedrals. But if you go to the book where these pictures came from, you'll see builder unknown, unknown, unknown. They completed things without knowing if anyone would notice. There's a story of one of the builders who was carving a tiny bird inside a beam that would be covered over by the roof. It is reported that someone came to him and asked him, "Why would you spend so much time in intricate detail on something that no one else will see?" His reply was, "Because God sees." They trusted God and saw everything. These followers of Jesus gave their lives for a work, a mammoth work, they would never see finished. They showed up day after day. Some of these cathedrals took over 100 years to build. That was much more than one working man's lifetime. And day after day, they had made personal sacrifice for no credit, showing up every day to work on a building that they would never see finished, that their name would never be on. One writer even goes as far to say that great cathedrals will never be built again because so few people are willing to sacrifice to that degree. When we aim for heaven, we get to see that no sacrifice is too small for God to notice. He sees everything we do, and everything we do puts a smile on his face. In August, I went to my niece's wedding up in Watsonville, California. And I sat across from a good friend of mine, Rick Noonan, and Rick told me this amazing story. It caught my attention. He said one of my daughters read a book, gave it to the other daughter. She read the book, got a hold of the author, and got an internship with him this last spring. When I got home to the desert, showed up in my office on Monday morning, in my box was this book, the same book that he was talking about, called Love Does. So I took that as a very serious message that I should read this book right away. And I can assure you I did over Labor Day weekend. Bob Goff, if you haven't read this book, this is really a fun read. It's almost as fun as Bill Doggetti's book. Bob's essential message is the great importance of loving everyone, being humble, and having a childlike faith. Find people that you don't understand and get to know their names, because God makes people and people make issues. But people aren't issues. What a great quote. Be humble. Humble people know people's names. Bob is best known for his adventurous spirit and radical means of showing generosity. Bob shared how he often allowed fear to hinder him from putting his faith into action, and told the story of when he was piloting a small plane and thought the front landing gear was not functioning properly. Afraid to land, Bob circled the landing strip several times, searching for a solution. With no time left, Bob finally lowered the plane to the ground, relieved to find out that the problem was simply an unlit green light. According to Bob, we often get stuck in a holding pattern of fear, waiting for a green light, rather than taking initiative. Your life is all the green light you need. Bob's conclusion is simple. Hold people close, love them throughout life's circumstances, good or bad. And what resonated with me reading that book was just the authenticity of living life. A good friend of mine gave me the book Living in the Power of the Holy Spirit by Charles Stanley. Charles writes, all believers are called according to God's purpose. He's quoting Romans 8:28. Not every person is going to turn on a Christian radio or television program or walk into a church to hear the good news preached. That is why God places his witnesses into every sector of society, in every type of circumstances and situations. Every believer is called by God to be a witness for Jesus Christ in the world in which God has placed him or her. Every believer can seek the name of Jesus in the marketplace, the hospital, the courtroom, the classroom, or on the golf course. Check out this slide. I was, in putting these videos together, I realized we have multi-level marketing for Christians in Commerce. Jose, come here. So Jeff Toner had Jim Foudy confined to a dentist chair and invited him to Christians in Commerce. My brother Jose was just invited, and he's at the bottom of this. So if you look at Jim connected with me. I connected with Clint Miller, who connected with Dwayne Valencia. Dwayne Valencia started the new La Quinta chapter. Justin Young came to the first couple meetings, and then he invited Jose. And there's your multi-level marketing downline. So that's why we invite, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we invite. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of downlines for Jesus. We're going to wrap this up with a couple quick short videos. But remember, aim for heaven and you get earth thrown in. And did I mention love? Encouragement changes people's direction in life. We know several people within CIC, and I can think of none other than Bud and Steve, who started a mentorship that really connected in a very profound way and has had a ripple effect much broader than that. So one of the things we can do in the workplace with people we work alongside is to continue to invite them. As we wrap up and we think workplace, the question is, are you Jesus? And I just started reading Rediscovering Jesus by Matthew Kelly. And in the prologue, I'll read this very short story. Our God is a God of surprises. It was the biggest meeting of Paul's life, and it had gone well. He couldn't wait to tell his wife and his boss. As he rushed out of the Brooklyn office building with the rest of his team, they noticed a vacant cab, a rare sight during rush hour. Eager to get a ride to the airport quickly so they can get home, they bolted toward the cab, yelling to the driver, get the driver's attention. But as they made their way across the sidewalk, they inadvertently knocked over a small produce stand. The rest of the team seemed oblivious until Paul stopped and turned around to go back. From beside the taxi, the others called to Paul, "Come on, you'll miss your flight." "Go ahead without me," Paul said. As he made his way back across the street toward the sidewalk covered in produce, at that moment he realized that the woman who had been behind the produce stand was blind. And she was just standing there crying softly with tears running down her face. It's okay, Paul said to her as he got down on his hands and knees and began picking up the fruits and vegetables. There were 100 people passing in each direction, but nobody else stopped to help. They just scurried off to wherever they were going. When the fruit was all back up on the stand, Paul began to neatly organize it, setting aside anything that was spoiled. Now he turned to the woman and asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded through her tears, then reaching for his wallet, he took out some bills and passed them to the woman, saying, "This money should cover the damages." With that, Paul turned and began to walk away. "Mister," the woman called out after him. Paul paused and turned around. "Are you Jesus?" He says, "Oh, no." The woman nodded and continued, "I only ask because I prayed for Jesus to help me as I heard my fruit falling all over the sidewalk." Paul turned away to leave again. Only now his eyes began to fill with tears. For a long time he wandered around looking for a taxi. After finally finding one, he sat in bumper-to-bumper traffic all the way to the airport. He had missed his flight, and because it was Friday, all the other flights were full. Paul spent the night in a hotel at the airport, but this gave him time to think. He couldn't get one question out of his head. When was the last time someone confused me for Jesus?